Welcome back to the channel. Recently, there's an article in the Direct talking about how Lucasfilm are absolutely petrified, scared shitless to actually make a Star Wars movie. It's only been, I think, 10 years and maybe 3 days now since Disney acquired Lucasfilm, and we haven't had a new movie in 3 years. There's no new movie actually in production as we speak. I think they announced something for 2025. So it's likely to be like 5 or 6 years between movies at this point. And I don't blame them at this point, Aaron Sparrow. They should be petrified because they've alienated so many fans at this point.
They should be absolutely terrified because nobody cares anymore. They took the brand of brands, and in 10 short years, they've let Kathleen Kennedy just completely run it into the ground. You know, the leadership at Lucasfilm, the product that they've put out, the choices that they've made have just all been bad and all been to the detriment of the franchise.
They make some really interesting points in this article that we're going to get to, but I do want to talk about first, they mentioned at one point that Andor is really, really high quality. It shows that the future is bright for Star Wars, and they think because word of mouth that eventually people are going to watch it. And it's like, who are you guys even kidding at this point? It doesn't matter how good Andor is. No one cares about that character. People hate everything associated with the sequel trilogy era stuff, all the movies. They've created one thing that people actually like, The Mandalorian, and they even screwed up the spinoff of that in the Book of Boba Fett show.
And in the Book of Boba Fett, they damaged The Mandalorian. You know, that whole like subplot with him, you know, The Mandalorian getting Grogu back, that just completely invalidated the second season. And the second season is what everybody loved. Everybody loved that capper where Luke came and he took Grogu off to be trained as a Jedi. And they just undo it in Book of Boba Fett, which we've been told is like episodes that were clipped out of Mandalorian season 3 and crammed into Book of Boba Fett because Book of Boba Fett was such a disaster. They've really done a bad job. And, you know, you would think that Andor might have had a chance, you know, it might have before all this bad Star Wars came out because people really liked Rogue One. And even when I saw Rogue One, I thought, man, I wonder what that character's backstory is, you know, because he's kind of like doing the shady, you know, yeah, he's on the side of the Angels, but he's having to do some really shady Black Ops kind of stuff. And I thought that would be a really interesting thing to explore. And now that they're exploring it, I don't care. I haven't even tuned in. You know, they've just lost that much goodwill that even this thing that I liked, I'm not interested in checking out the spinoff of it.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And they are scared shitless to make a movie now. This is what they said in the Direct. It's been abundantly clear for years that internal turmoil has stalled the film development process for the company since the completion of the sequel trilogy. This was confirmed last week when Lucasfilm Senior Vice President Michelle Roujon was demoted. The producer was tasked with overseeing Rogue Squadron's development in addition to other new films and was relieved of her duties following too many creative difficulties. Now, 3 years removed from the last silver screen experience, Star Wars fans are itching to get back into theaters for a journey into a galaxy far, far away. That time is still a few years away at best, and it's not one that Lucasfilm is particularly looking forward to. With so much riding on the next theatrical title, Lucasfilm executives are actually worried about the franchise's next steps. Yes, they should be worried, and they can lay it all at the feet of Kathleen Kennedy. So many stupid ideas, so many stupid mistakes that were easily correctable. Star Wars all of a sudden needed to appeal to everybody, so then it ended up appealing to nobody. And I don't know anyone that's a Star Wars fan that's like, man, I'm just itching to get into the theater to watch a brand new Star Wars film from Disney and Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah, that's where even though you've got an article that's being somewhat critical, you still see they have to come in, they have to shill a little bit. You know, oh, fans are itching to get back into theaters to see a new Star Wars project. No, they're not. They're largely not. And that's why Lucasfilm is terrified, is because they've lost the connection to the fan base and they know it and they don't know how to get it back. They don't know what they're doing. Kathleen Kennedy's leadership has been a complete disaster. She doesn't understand Star Wars. She doesn't understand what the fans want. And I kind of knew, like, I kind of felt like, you know, they were already in trouble when they canceled the expanded universe. They said, like, oh, all that doesn't count. We're going to create our own new canon.
It's Legends.
Yeah, it's Legends now. And it's like, well, you know, those Legends are still way better than anything that you've given us under this this new ownership. You know, like I said, Rogue One is the only thing that anybody's really kind of like cared about theatrically that hasn't been divisive, that fans were pretty much on board for. And you've got a spin-off show that nobody cares about. And it's because you've just damaged your credibility with all of these terrible projects. You know, Mandalorian Season 2, high point. People were like, okay, maybe, you know, maybe Filoni and Favreau, maybe they can get this back on track. and then they come out and they drop the deuce that was Book of Boba Fett. That apparently Kathleen Kennedy had a large hand in changing, and Robert Rodriguez just completely butchered if the rumors are to be believed. So that lost fan goodwill. Kenobi, which was a canon destroying farce that looked like it was filmed just out in the high desert of California. It had no production value. It broke the character in so many ways. It just ruined the canon. And people are just like, I'm so done with this. And then Andor comes along, and just nobody cares. It's not even though we liked Rogue One, you've broken our will so much. You've just ruined so much fan enthusiasm that nobody's watching.
This is also what the Direct said. Puck Industry insider Matthew Bologna reported Lucasfilm's grueling developmental time for the next Star Wars film is a result of a culture of fear and indecision among company executives. Lucasfilm's internal mantra for the new movies is getting it right, an attitude formed after the sequel trilogy's development and production. The company internally acknowledges that the sequels were rushed to meet aggressive release dates. The resulting trilogy was something Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy elected to play safe, choosing fan service and franchise management over creative swings. I do not get that at all. Where was the fan service in that sequel trilogy? Was it when they devolved all the characters like Luke and had him drinking titty milk out of an alien? Was it when they decided Han Solo, despite all the progression from being a swindling thief into becoming a general, all of a sudden was a thief again, that was a deadbeat dad, and it ends up dying for absolutely no reason? Was the fan service when they didn't get the original trilogy characters back together one last time, which is all anybody really ever wanted with them being in the movies to begin with? We got no fan service. Yes, they made planets that looked like the original trilogy movies. Yes, there were sounds that sounded like Star Wars. Yes, it was in space, but other than that, I didn't get any fucking fan service from that movie.
No, there was none at all. So again, this is where you see the shill coming in. It's like they still have to kind of protect this company because they still want access. So they're going to write this, sort of pseudo, clinical analysis, but they're also going to try to shield them as much as possible. Yeah, it was not a fan service heavy sequel trilogy. It actually gave nobody anything that they really wanted. We, like you said, we didn't get the three characters back on screen. That was the most basic thing, was getting Luke, Han, and Leia back in scenes together. That was what that's why The Force Awakens made so much money, is because people were hoping that was what was going to happen. Then The Last Jedi made less money. Not only because that couldn't happen after the first film, but also because that was a terrible movie. It was a terrible movie, and it reduced the hero of the saga, Luke Skywalker, to a broken old man, who was bitter and sitting on an island. So they basically took
his nephew for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, just bitter and sad and angry. They took Mark Hamill from real life and just plugged him into the movie instead of making it Luke Skywalker. It's just really unfortunate. And then by The Rise of Skywalker, they tried to course correct. So people who liked The Last Jedi hated it, and it was so terrible because it had to deal with the things of Last Jedi, even though it tried to negate them, that the fans of the original trilogy who hated The Last Jedi absolutely hated it. So you pleased nobody. And it just broke the canon. And Disney just keeps making the same mistake going back to the well. The fact that Galaxy's Edge is based on the sequel trilogy. The fact that Galactic Star Cruiser is based on the sequel trilogy. They keep doubling down on failure. That's not what the fans want. And this is the most brilliant thing in the world that they should be tapping into is, they complain about the trolls. They go out of their way to actually make a TV show that, mocks the trolls, mocks the fans for their complaints. You have free market research all over YouTube where the fans are literally screaming at you what they want from these franchises. And yet you're still going out and you're doing focus groups. You're paying to do focus groups. It's like you've got all the focus groups that you need right here on the internet. They're telling you what they want. They're telling you what you need to do to fix it. And you just refuse to do it. It's mind-boggling to me.
It's crazy. I think they meant by fan service, maybe Palpatine returning for the third film was the fan service. But I don't know any Star Wars fans that wanted to see that. And if they did see it, they wanted it to be like the books in the comic books, where it was done actually really well. It was actually kind of a cool story, how Palpatine remained and then rose back to power, and Luke had to defeat him again. That was basically the backbone for a story if you wanted to return Palpatine to the universe and have him be a part of the sequel trilogy, which I wouldn't have recommended to begin with because I don't think anyone really wanted to see that. But the Legends, they had so many cool stories and so many things that they could have done in so many different eras, including right after the original trilogy. And unlike what Kevin Feige did with the MCU, at least initially, going to the source material, finding the best stories, repurposing them for the MCU and putting them out there and doing good movies. They went and they dumped all of it. The source material for Disney Star Wars should have been the original canon that they had, that they dropped and called Legends.
No, you're absolutely right, Wes. They had all of this material to work with, and we actually had a statement from Kathleen Kennedy where she came out and she said, well, you have to understand every one of these movies is a tough nut to crack because, unlike Marvel, we don't have all this source material to draw from. And fans of the expanded universe were going, right here. As a matter of fact, you are drawing from it. You're plucking little things out like Thrawn, and you're throwing him, Grand Admiral Thrawn, you throw him into Clone Wars. And, he's fine in that role, but he's not as good as he was in the Heir to the Empire trilogy. So you're pulling things from the expanded universe and you're working them into your new terrible continuity, and you're thus lowering their value. They're not elevating your crappy Star Wars that you're putting out. You're actually lowering their value by putting them in your crappy Star Wars. The whole power structure at Lucasfilm needs an overhaul. And I don't know what the answer is anymore. I know that getting Kathleen Kennedy out of there has got to be like priority one if you want anything good to happen. This new Indiana Jones film that she's working on sounds like an absolute disaster. It just seems like they're just throwing good money after bad. And if you want to please the shareholders, you want to please the fans, you want to make money, you've got to go back to giving fans what they want. But at this point, you've abused the fan base so much that they're largely indifferent. They've lost their passion. They're not even passionate enough to hate on this stuff anymore. They're just ignoring it like they're doing with Andor.
This is the last part of the article that I'm going to talk about. They said, most important is that the next film is rooted in what fans love about Star Wars, and the need for high quality can't be overstated. Kennedy is looking to usher in a new era of Star Wars, but Lucasfilm's fear comes from having to be bold and outdo itself. Kathleen Kennedy is making life more difficult for herself than it needs to be. The same can be said for the rest of Lucasfilm's senior executives. Absolutely. They don't need to outdo themselves because you really can't outdo what they did with that sequel trilogy. They need to understand why people actually like Star Wars. It's not just the planets and the sounds and all that stuff. It's the characters. It's the lore. It was the world that was built by George Lucas. They completely discarded all of it. They threw it in the dumpster. They lit it on fire. And then they were like, what do you mean you don't like this?
The thing with George was, whether you liked the prequels or not, they've been kind of like dissected ad nauseum. But he did try. You have to give him at least credit for the fact that he did try to do something different. And his approach was, anytime you go and you do like a new series of films, it should be something different. And if you look at his pitches for the sequel trilogy, it was something different. It wasn't just the Empire again with a new coat of paint and a new name. The First Order. With everything looking a little more plastic and a little more stupid. I hate those stormtrooper designs. Every time I see them walking around Disneyland and Galaxy's Edge, I want to throw up in my mouth. It's like, give me real stormtroopers, give me real Star Wars. Stop with this pale imitation. And that's unfortunately, what the Disney version of Star Wars has been. It's been a pale imitation. And so you've got to get back if you want to save this franchise. And again, I don't know if there's any saving it, but I feel like, fans are very forgiving and they'll come back with goodwill if you respect them and you give them what they want. You've got to go back to basics. You've got to invalidate the sequel trilogy, stop referring to it, just let it be its thing, and just let that fade into Legends. That should not control the future of Star Wars. And you want to tell all these stories in between Return of the Jedi and the sequel trilogy that shouldn't exist, that's fine, but go and tell a different story that invalidates the sequel trilogy. That'll go a long way towards building fan goodwill. But as long as that sequel trilogy stands as where you're saying that Star Wars goes, that you're saying that's where the original trilogy leads to, you're not going to get back a huge portion of the fan base.
After seeing The Last Jedi in theater, I had no intention of ever seeing a Star Wars movie again. But I did listen to the viewers. I actually listened to what you guys said, and you wanted to hear what Aaron and I thought about The Rise of Skywalker. We actually did a 40-minute video breaking down everything wrong with that movie after I finally watched it about a year after it came out, maybe 2 years. It's been quite a while. Definitely check this one out. We go in depth. We are very passionate about Star Wars, and we're very critical about the things that don't work. Definitely check this one out if you want some more Aaron and Wes talking Star Wars. If you don't see it there, there's also a link in the video description.